You might have heard of Panthera leo, de facto, magnum opus, per se, quid pro quo, or terra firma. One thing all these terms have in common is the fact that they are all derived from a dead language, Latin. Latin is a language which no one speaks natively since ancient Rome, and since then the language has evolved into different languages, for example, French, Italian, and Spanish. A common practice in modern day Latin learning is to imitate and emulate the great Roman authors such as Cicero's De Natura Deorum on the nature of gods, Julius Caesar's De Bello Gallicius on the war in Gaul, and Levy's multiple volumes on history of Rome and many famous works of. Due to the fact that no one speaks Latin anymore, we have no way of verifying how actually it was spoken, which words were pronounced in what way, and what the tone of the speech was. All we can do is try to reimagine and emulate according to what we expect it to be from existing context and word structuring. So, how did such a language come into being the default language for naming relatively modern discoveries in science? For that, we need to go back to the imperial era, where some of the Latin came over into Old English from West Germanica. The process which continued until a lot of words started to flood into Britain through Christianity, which included words such as apostolos, credo, crucium, discipulus, martyr, which are turned into apostle, creed, crucifix, discipline, and martyr in English. Following the Norman conquest, a lot of Latin words were added to English through Norman French in a variety of fields across religion, law, and upper class vocabulary. During those Middle Ages, the field of science was virtually undeveloped, so scientific words from Latin, sometimes of Greek origin, in English were used in simple astronomical and geographical terms, such as comet, equator, circumference. Names of plants, such as asparagus, juniper, lilies, roses, violets. Names of animals, locust, asp, and names of minerals, copper and onyx. As the name suggests, in classical culture and discovery and learning of Latin roots, which led to addition of Latin words in more general nature. Area, innuendo, consensus, curriculum, impetus, and radius. All these changes, along with adopting of Latin in schools, made English even more open to Latin, such as bacteria, corona, fungus, opus, strata, and virus, which are universally spoken in English as English words, which shows just how compatible English is with Latin. The most extensive pre Enlightenment era use of Latin was by an English botanist, John Ray, who wrote over 3,000 pages of Historia Plantarum, which was divided into three massive folios and described an astronomical 18,000 species. Following a lack of funding and overlapping classification system, another French botanist who went by Joseph Piton de Tournefort from Paris published Elements de Botanique in 1969, then later republished it in Latin with the title Institutiones Re Herbariae in 1700, where he explained his classification system based entirely on genus with distinctions drawn from morphological differences in the corolla, which is the reproductive part of the flower. Using this constricted methodology, Tournefort described more than 10,000 species and classified them into nearly 700 types. The works of this French botanist were very popular and influential until the mid 18th century. Carl Linnaeus was a Swedish botanist, zoologist, and physician who is known for formalizing and creating a binomial system which is still in use today. This system, where each species of plants and animals is given a genus name followed by a specific species name, with both names being in Latin. He had the option of choosing to publish his discoveries and classifications in Swedish or Latin, but he chose Latin due to its prevalence in Europe rather than limiting it to his own language and country. First, he started with Fundamenta Botanica or Botanical Fundamentals, then Genera Plantarum, Origin of Plants, and after that, Philosophia Botanica, the science of botany, and Species Plantarum, plant species. The extensive coverage in Latin established these as the standards all over Europe. Secondly, Linnaeus utilized available terms as they had been used in previous works while remaining true to established lexical definitions. In the words of William T. Stearns, he selected from the classical words converted into technical terms by his predecessors those which seemed apt, pleasing, and unambiguous. The third contribution was the adoption of Latin words for botanical use with no regard for their original classical meanings. Linnaeus's most significant innovation was a full-fledged development of botanical description, commenced in Systema Naturae in 1735, with his most comprehensive treatment occurring in 10th edition in 1758, which was considerably enhanced in 12th edition. The fully developed system, the sequence proceeding from the specific aptly named species to the general expanse of what we know today as species, genus, family, order, class, phylum, and kingdom. For example, if we want to identify an oak tree, let's say Quercus alba, white oak of eastern North America. Alba, meaning white, which signifies one of the 600 species belonging to the genus Quercus, which means oak, which is part of the family of Fabaceae, of the order Phageales, one of the class of Magnoliopsida, of the phylum Anthrophyta of the kingdom Plantae. In 1750, Linnaeus expanded his Fundamenta Botanica from 1736, which was just 36 pages, to a 364-page book called Philosophia Botanica with 11 illustration plates. With this, it was defined as the first textbook of descriptive, systematic botany and botanical Latin. Its influence is evident in translations and expanded illustrations that soon appeared in England, France, and Germany. Meanwhile, with the generation of new knowledge and discoveries, new vocabulary was needed, and Latin became the default source. But classical Latin had one limitation. Despite its extensive linguistic richness, it could not support the linguistic needs of new learning. It was here that a new kind of Latin was developed, a vocabulary conforming to the structure of Latin linguistics, prefixes, suffixes, and roots was created. By the turn of the century, binomial nomenclature and supporting Latin vocabulary of plant, stems, leaves, blossoms, and colors was developed, enough so that plants could be observed and identified without supporting illustrations. And once it was established securely in biology, it subsequently spread well far and beyond biology into chemical elements, which were often derived from Greek deities or mythological figures. Helium was Helios, iridium was from Iris, plutonium was Pluto, with their endings routinely Latinized. Chemical elements from Latin sometimes honor deities: mercury from Mercurius, cerium from Ceres, neptunium from Neptune. When new chemical elements are named to honor eminent historical figures, they are regularly provided with Latin endings. Copernicium from Copernicus, curium from Marie Curie, Rutherfordium from Ernest Rutherford. English, as the most widely spoken language in the world, has been exceptionally receptive to scientific Latin. To a large extent, this is the result of many more existing Latin words that have been preserved in English so well that they are hard to distinguish from English as foreign.